Hey everyone, Mason here. Today I'm going to show you how to use scripts in Home Assistant and talk about some of the advantages of using them. Then later on I'm also going to show you how you can trigger a script within a Node-RED flow, which can be really handy. Let's get started. The Home Assistant user interface is great for seeing all your different devices that you have configured and also for triggering them individually. So if I wanted to turn on the basement lamps, I could do that really easily here. But now consider the situation where I was away from home and I wanted to turn off all the lights inside the house. I can still do that individually by tracking down the basement lamps, the family room light, and the master bedroom light. But as I add more smart lights and switches to the house, this process becomes a lot more tedious. This is why making use of scripts can be really handy. I'll go ahead and jump over to the script editor and we could take a look at setting one of these up. I actually already have a script created to turn off the inside lights, but I'll go ahead and create another one so you could see the process of putting it together. Just start by clicking the plus sign down here in the bottom right to create a new empty script. Then go ahead and give it a name. Then you can start adding in a series of individual actions that will be executed when the script is run. In my case, all the action types are going to be call service. Let's start with the family room light, which is a switch. I'll go ahead and filter down the services starting with switch, like so, and then choose the turn off. Next, the service data will hold the JSON that's required to perform the service. I usually look this up each time to make sure I get the syntax and the available parameters correct. I do that by going to another tab in Home Assistant and then choosing the first icon under the developer tools for services. Now you can look up the service that you're trying to call, which in our case was the switch.turnoff. And it actually pulled in the correct entity, but you could find any of the other switches that are available, and we wanted family room switch. Now I'll go ahead and copy the JSON here, jump back to our script that we're working on, and plug that in. Next we can go ahead and add another action. In this case will actually again be switch.turnoff. And once again, I'll jump back over to my other Home Assistant tab. This time it's going to be for the basement lamps. I'll switch to that entity, grab the JSON here, jump back to my script and plug that in. Alright, now that we got our two switches added, let's go ahead and add our last action. In this case, it's actually going to be for a device that's identified as a light. So we're going to be using a different service here. I'll go ahead and filter down to light and choose our light.turnoff. And again, to identify the JSON that we need here, I'll go ahead and flip over to our other tab of Home Assistant. Look for that service, which again was the light.turnoff. And actually we only have one entity that's identified as a light, so that pulled in automatically, but we can just double check that that's the master bedroom light here. And I can copy this JSON, bring it back over to our script and go ahead and plug that in. And now we have all three of our actions built out that are going to perform the individual actions that will all run together. So it'll turn off the family room lights, the basement lamps, and also the master bedroom light. I'll go ahead and save that here. Now if we jump back over to the Home Assistant, the main user interface, and scroll down to the script section, we can see that new script that we just made, turn off inside lights too. And why don't we go ahead and test it out really quick. I'll turn on the basement lamps, the family room light, and the master bedroom light. And now I'll go ahead and run this script. And you can see the basement lamps, and the family room light, and now the master bedroom light are all turned off. Great. This is already pretty handy, But let's take it a step further and see how we can integrate this into a Node-RED flow. I'll go ahead and jump over to this other tab I have open for Node-RED, and I have a new flow that's created with nothing here. I'll go ahead and drag out an eject node that we'll use as a trigger, and then also the Home Assistant call service node. This will be the node that we actually use to call the script from. And I'll go ahead and link those together. Now let's open the call service node and give it a name. And this is just going to be executing the script to turn off the lights. I'll go ahead and choose the domain, and this is going to be the type of device. In our case, that's going to be script. And then the services actually get filtered down based on that domain, which is super nice. And to run the script, it's actually just turn on. And probably the hardest part of setting this up is actually tracking down the entity ID for the script. So we can do this by jumping back to Home Assistant. And this time actually going to the second option under the developer tools for states. On the filter entities little, you can type in script. And now it filters down to all the scripts that we have. And we can actually see the friendly names here. And the one that we just made was called Turn Off Inside Lights 2. So this first column is the entity ID. I'll go ahead and copy that. Jump back over to Node-RED. Plug that in here. This last section that's labeled as data, this is where you can put in JSON that will be used when the service is called. Usually you'll use this when there's extra parameters that you need to pass in that are separate than just the service that's being called along with the entity ID, because that'll be built out automatically by this node. So in our case, that's all we needed, so we don't actually have to plug anything in here. Now I'll go ahead and hit done. This was actually all we needed for this basic setup, so I'll go ahead and deploy this. And to test it out, I'll actually want to make sure that we have some lights on. So I'll flip back over to Home Assistant really quick. Turn those lights on. Jump back to Node-RED. And I'll just use this basic inject node that's just going to trigger the call service node. Go ahead and press that. It called the script.turnOn. You could see that message here. And then let's flip back over to Home Assistant and take a look. Oh, and you could see basement lamps, family room light, and the master bedroom all flipped off when I did that. Now that I have this set up, it actually opens up even more possibilities. For example, if I had other automation flows that I also wanted to turn off the inside lights, I can just go ahead and copy this node and then use it in multiple places. This also makes maintenance easier as well. For example, if I was to get some new lights that I wanted to install in my kitchen, I would likely want to add them into my automations that were turning off my inside lights. If I had that in these 3 automation flows without using a script, I'd then be adding new nodes to each of these automation flows for each light that I added in. Then I have to figure out how to piece them in to the existing flow, and it'd just be kind of annoying. However, using the script, it actually makes it so I don't have to touch my Node-RED flow at all. Instead, I would just jump back over to Home Assistant and launch the script editor, jump back into my script, then I can add a new action for each of the lights that I just installed. So I'll just pretend that I'm doing that here. I'd plug in my JSON, go ahead and save it. Now that my script is updated, that would have also then updated everywhere that I'm calling that script from. So now all my Node-RED flows are up to date and I don't have to mess around with them. Great. Well, this brings me to the end of the quick demo on Home Assistant scripts. If you have questions about anything that I showed here, feel free to ask in the comments. And if you found this helpful and would like to see more videos like it, make sure to subscribe. I have a few other videos in mind, but if you'd like to see something specific, make sure to let me know. Thanks for watching.